That's no bueno. Okay, so we'll start over again because apparently the mute was on. I didn't realize that. So I'm sorry about that. So when you travel full time, how do you keep from feeling like you're just wandering without a compass? Since you're going to be mobile, you want to take advantage and go see the world. But at the same time, with so many options out there, you might be a little overwhelmed trying to figure out where to go and how you're going to get there. In today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to cover 3 easy steps to help you plan your travel like a boss. So we're going to remove as much of the headache as we can and help you see the country without feeling like you're going to run yourself ragged, which is a big deal. That's a big part of it. So you're looking at me saying, I love to travel, but when I look at a map, I have a hard time prioritizing. And the truth of the matter is that planning can be fun, but it can also suck the life out of you. You also don't want to be the person that needs a vacation after you get back from your vacation. Have you ever been there before? You come home after your vacation, you're like, I'm exhausted. I can't go to work tomorrow. How am I going to do this? So if you're ready to plan like an expert without pulling your hair out, then let's get started. Follow along today. My name is Jim Miller, and what I do is I help families transition their lives easily and smoothly into an RV lifestyle. So the way I do this is by helping them through a process that I call our MAPS process, which lets them address the issues that people are going to come up with, whether they want to travel for 14 days or for 14 months. So today, we're going to look at how we travel and how we plan that travel, because there are so many different things that go into it. I remember growing up when, and tell me if this is something that you've ever dealt with before. I remember growing up and the teacher would get up in front of the class sometimes and the teacher would say something along these lines. Tell me if this resonates with you. The teacher would say something like, okay, class, so our assignment that we're going to be doing, you're going to start today and it's going to be due in 1 week, is that you're going to need to write a 3-page paper on whatever topic you want to cover. Did you ever get that? And you get this little heart palpitation, right? If everything is an option, then that makes it so much more difficult. What I need is I need you to tell me an area, like give me a little bit of a barrier, something to look at so that I can start to plan from there. Give me a little ground zero so that I can start to move out from there. And I'm good. But if you just say, sky's the limit, just pick where you want to go, whatever you want to do, that can be hard for me. I just need something to keep me exploring, to keep me to give me a little guidance is what I need. And so when I look at these teachers and they say, you can write about whatever you want, that gave me a little heart attack. And the same can be true when you begin to travel full time and you realize that the world is your oyster. You have now all of the United States is now your battleground, the places where you can go and find that you want to stay. And you're limited. You may be limited by a few things, but until you begin to create some of those confines for yourself, it can be really overwhelming. And so I want us today to begin to try to put a little bit of framework around travel plans so that we can start to look at these ideas of where we're going to go and how we're going to get there that are going to give you some guidance. And it's going to take so much of the stress out of the planning process. Okay. So if you're with me, give me a thumbs up. We're going to dig in and let's get started right now. So the first thing is we're going to look at 3 easy steps. The first thing that you're going to look at is I want you to think long term. Think long term. And I really kind of cheated when I said this because there are a few things that I mean by this. It's not just like a one-trick pony here. So when I say that I want you to think long term, I want you to think in a few different ways. First off, your budget's going to be a big factor, right? For most people. For most people, budget is going to be a bit of a factor. You have to look at not only the cost of the RV and the truck, but when you travel from one part of the country to another, you've also got to pay for gas, which at certain times can be more expensive than others. And so when we look at the cost of gas, when we look at the cost of how much it costs to get from one place to another, that is a big factor. For example, right now we're in Arizona, and we are about to travel from Arizona to Texas. And we have looked at the cost of gas, purely towing, going from Arizona to Texas is going to cost us $1,000 in gas. That's a pretty significant chunk of change. And so if you're working on figuring out where you're going to go, then you need to recognize that you're going to have to pay to get there, right? Just like if you were to buy a bus ticket or an airplane ticket, you would have to pay to go from point A to point Z, whatever that might be. And the same is true of traveling full time. It's not just that you can just go wherever you want. You don't have to pay for hotels, which is awesome. You don't have to pay for the airline ticket, which is amazing, but you do have to pay for the gas to get yourself there. So that's a factor. Now, another benefit of it is that you're not looking at the restaurants. You don't have to pay for restaurants the same way. You can just stop, pull over, and make a sandwich in the car or in the truck, in the RV, because it's right there with you. Your house is there with you. And so that helps. That helps quite a bit. But what we're looking at is this idea that you need to think then long-term where you're going to be. So look at your budget and recognize that there may be a significant amount of money that it's going to cost from get to here just in gas. But then also the places that you're going to stay. So if you have to park somewhere overnight, you're very likely going to end up paying money to stop there. Now, there are tons of free options out there, but in some respects, you get what you pay for. So you can stop at a Cracker Barrel. Some Walmarts will still allow you to park there. There's Bureau of Land Management, BLM, if you're in the west part of the country. That is free land. It is land that is owned by the government. You're allowed to park there for up to 14 days without paying. So these are all different options that are fantastic options for free places to stay. But a lot of times, if you're staying in one of these free places, you're not being able to get water at Cracker Barrel or Walmart. You're not going to be able to empty your gray tanks there. Or your black tanks. You're not going to be able to hook up and have electricity. And so depending on the weather, that may be a really big factor. BLM is amazing. Cracker Barrel is awesome. But in the heat of summer in Texas, it's not fun because it's 95 degrees outside and it cools off to 85 at night. But the inside of your RV is going to be hot as blazes. And if you're trying to sleep in 95 degree weather, it's not very easy to do. And so you really need to think about where you're going to stay. So that's all part of that budgeting process. You may not mind sleeping in 90 degrees, but if you've got kids that are younger, they're going to mind. If you have a wife, your wife is going to mind, most likely. Just throwing that out there, something to think about. So anyway, so the budget's a big deal. And then figuring out where you're going to go from point A to point Z. Where is your ultimate goal? Now, we have very often used our business as a way to kind of find that end point where we were traveling. For example, the first trip that we took in our RV was from our house in Texas, our home in Texas. Sold the house, but the RV park where we were staying in Texas. And then we traveled all the way across the country to Long Beach, California, because we had a business engagement there. We were going to be there for 3 days. And so that was our trip. We knew that we were leaving from Texas, from Kingwood, and that we were going to be in Long Beach, California. And we knew the dates that we had to be there, February 24th or whatever. And so we knew that leaving January 1st, getting here February 24th, we had all this time to cover that span. So we used our business to figure out the endpoint for us. Some other things that you could use really simply are holidays. So maybe you want to visit family for Christmas or Thanksgiving, or you want to be there for a birthday or a special occasion. Father's Day may be a big deal. So you may want to travel in order to visit places, different parts of the country for special days. That is a great way to kind of help you line out where you're going to head. So maybe it's a business, maybe it's special engagements like a big event. Maybe it's seasonal. So there are literally thousands of people that travel north in the summer and then travel south in the winter. North in the summer, south in the winter. So in the summer, they want to escape to cooler weather. And so they go find places in Michigan or Washington State or Yeah, we're here in northern Arizona at 8,000 feet. It's amazing up here. Laramie, Wyoming, we've spent the summer there. Unbelievably gorgeous weather. And so there are these fantastic places that you can go and visit seasonally, being in the north for the summer where the temperatures are milder. And then as winter comes, you start to head south again. So for us, we are going to be in South Texas in November through December because the temperatures there are supposed to average out pretty comfortable. So figuring out, yes, snowbirding, right? Snowbirding. And so figuring out whether you're going to chase the seasons is a great thing. There's actually, you're going to love this. So I should have found this so I could show it to you, but you can go and find, there are maps that will show you where you can chase 70 degrees. So it will show you different parts of the country, and it will help you to create a travel plan so that you can be in places where the average temperature during the day is 70 degrees all through the course of the year. You can imagine you start off in the south, and then eventually in the winter you're up in Alaska, and then you start to head back down south again. But it gives you this amazing opportunity then to chase that 70-degree weather. And so so maybe 70 degrees is going to be your ultimate goal. Maybe that's what you're coming after. And what a great thing to chase too, right? So ultimately you've got to think long term. All right, figure out where your endpoint is. Where are you right now? And then we've got some parameters that we can work with. And that's going to help set your brain up for success. Instead of just sitting there wandering and wondering where you're going to go, you have some parameters around it. Okay? So think long term. It's number one, Band-Aid finger. Think long term, Band-Aid finger is number one. And then second, I'm going to suggest that you need to find your rhythm. So when we started traveling, we went, like I mentioned, we went from the Houston, Texas area to Long Beach, California area. And we had a couple months to travel that distance. So it wasn't like we weren't racing to get there, but we were traveling every 3 or 4 days, and even at times once a week, all through that span. And then when we got to Long Beach, we spent a few days there, and then we headed east, and then we headed south, and then north, and then west, and then south, and then all of these travels that we went through. We were traveling every week, maybe every 2 weeks at the stretch at the outside, but then sometimes even every 2 or 3 days. And after we had been doing that for a few months, we were exhausted. We were exhausted. Now, I know there are certain setups that will allow you to move more quickly, more easily. So we have a fifth wheel. And so it takes us an hour, sometimes two, depending on how handy the kids are, helpful the kids are that morning. It takes 1 or 2 hours for us to prep the RV to go, between airing up tires, between moving our homeschool stuff around, between battening down all our cookware, making sure everything is in its homes, that latches are closed, that all of our cabinets are bungee corded. Okay, we have all of these things that we do that we have to do every single time we travel. And then when we get somewhere, we got to set up again. You got to find a place where you're level. You got to pull the sides back out. All the stuff that you got to do. And so it takes us an hour, maybe 2, to get everything tightened down, and then an hour or 2 to set up when we get there. And so that's 2 to 4 hours out of your day right there, not including the driving. Okay, so if you're doing that once a week, then you have now chopped off 1 day a week off of your week just for traveling. It can be exhausting. And if you're running a business, then you've lost a day of work. So you have to find your rhythm. Some of that is going to depend on your rig. Even with your rig, Amy makes a great point here that even with your rig, the number of slides that you have, the slides are the things on the side of your RV that move in and out to give you more space inside. So the number of slides that you have is going to be a big factor in that. So you have the slides, you have the size of your RV, you have Class A versus Class B versus Class C versus fifth wheel versus travel trailer versus Airstream versus a mini pop-up. All of these are different factors that are going to really change and affect how difficult or easy it is for you to travel. And so you have to find your rhythm. And I would suggest, personally, erring on the side of going slowly as opposed to the side of going quickly. And here is the why. Okay, first off, because um, as I mentioned, traveling frequently can be very exhausting and very time consuming, right? So there's the exhausting part of it. Secondly, we found that after traveling for even 2.5 years, we have been in places and had a list of things that we wanted to accomplish while we were there, things that we wanted to go see in that part of the country. And then when we left, we realized that we had more things to do than when we first got there. So we may have had 5 things on our list when we got to Phoenix. We had 5 things on our list that we wanted to go see and do while we were there. But when we left, we had done 3 of those. So we had 2 left over. But then we added 6 more because we talked to the locals and found out great things to do and a really cool museum that we didn't know about. And oh my gosh, we never ended up getting to the Saguaro National Park. And so all of these different things that when you travel, you begin to come into these places and you experience things. But to truly experience a place, you need a little more time. You need a little more time. And so again, as part of that time factor, so if you're spending 1 week there and then traveling, you've cut 1 day off of your week for travel. If you're trying to operate a business, let's say that you're working 5 days a week. Okay. So 1 day of travel, you're working 5 days a week. And now you have that 7th day. So you've got 1 day to go experience everything. Assuming that there aren't any issues that you need to take care of during the week that would take up your time and keep you from doing it. So there's a lot to consider and to think about while you're traveling just in that time frame. So I suggest taking a couple weeks everywhere you go. Now, an additional reason to do that is a lot of the places that you would stay, a lot of the RV parks where you would stay are going to have a weekly rate, and then some will even have a monthly rate, which is greatly discounted. For example, the park where we're staying at right now, is $55 a day. So if you look at 3 weeks, or if you look at 1 week, that's going to be $350 a week, basically. I'm just doing round numbers here, so please don't correct my math. But it's going to be round numbers. So $350 a week, but it's $1,000 for an entire month. Okay, all told. So the place that we were staying in, the place that we're going to go stay in here in a month is $500 a month. And so you can see that you can find places for 1 month that are way less expensive than they would be for a daily rate. And so if you're adding up, you're staying 3 days here and then 3 days here and then 3 days here, you're not getting any discounted rates. So your cost is going to creep up significantly. Not to mention the fact that if you're traveling more often, then you're paying all that gas that you weren't going to be paying if you're more stationary. And so there are a lot of different factors that cost-wise, staying stationary for longer periods of time can be financially more beneficial. So that's another thing to figure in as well. So Amy asks, how can we get the notes from this video? So if you type in, oh my gosh, oh, so I'm going to give you a word to type in below, and I'll send you the notes when they come out. But the word is expert. I had a brain lock there. Expert. I'm moving back and forth between too many things. So if you type in the word expert below, then I'll make sure that you get the notes when they go live, so that you can follow along. I'm also going to have a little surprise that I'll send you. That's going to be our planning tool. It'll give you 7 days free in our planning tool that we use to help us. So we're going to send this out, and then you'll be able to get those notes, and I'll send you a link so that you can get a discount on that. You can get that 7 days of free on our favorite planning tool that we use when we travel. But so finding your rhythm is a big deal. Okay. Now, if you find your rhythm and you say, so I've got to be here in 3 months from here. Okay. Now, if you say, well, so I'd like to spend a month at a place, or maybe at least 2 weeks in a place, that helps you then to narrow down how far you're going to go. So when you look at where you are now and where you're going, then you're going to figure out, okay, it takes us 24 hours. Let's say it's a 24-hour drive. Okay. You're going to add 20% to that. because you're in an RV. Yes, I said 20%, 20%. That was not a mispronunciation. You're going to add a lot of time, a significant amount of time, because you're driving an RV. You're going to have to stop for gas more often. You're going to have to drive more slowly. You're going to have to let the other car go in front of you. There are a lot of different reasons that you would want to allow more time when you're traveling as you're driving an RV. 20% has been a pretty good number for us. So if it's a 3-hour drive, we plan on being 4 hours. That's what we look at. If it's a 4-hour drive, we add an extra hour to that, just as a general rule. And remember, I said it could be 1 to 2 hours on each end for getting set up, and then breaking down as you travel. And so we don't like to travel for more than 3 or 4 hours of driving either, because that can be exhausting, not only for the driver, but for the kids as well. It can be really tiring. So then when you look at this 24-hour trip that you're taking, 24-hour drive, then we try to divide that into chunks of 3 to 4 hours that we can make along the way. So we're going to leave here in a couple weeks, and we're going to head to Texas. And so what Amy has done is she has gone and figured out, okay, we can be here in 3 or 4 hours. And then she starts to look for places to stay there. Okay, we can be here in 3 to 4 hours. So we start to look for places to stay there. So finding your rhythm, and then that allows you, that third part then, to fill in the gaps. So think long term. We're here today. I want to be here on this date. Find your rhythm, how frequently you're going to travel, and then how far are you going to travel. And then you can begin that process of filling in the gaps. So if I know that I'm here, I'm going to end up here, and that I want to travel, I want to look at a 4-hour drive for that day. Now I have a great way to start to set up my trip. And it really gives me a great parameter for how to figure out where I'm going to stay from one day to the next. So filling in those gaps, then, that becomes the fun. You can start to look at different places to stay. You can go online and find different places that are RV parks that are going to be around where you're going. But then you can also begin to look into not just the RV parks, but you can look at that BLM property. You can find those Cracker Barrels to help you fill in the gaps. You can find Boondocker Welcome and Harvest Host places where you can stay in those gaps. And you can find all of these different places that you're going to be able to stop and have some great experiences. And that's where then you begin to have the fun of it. You can find these really interesting places that you can stop for, some for a day or two, some for a week, some for a month. And now you can start to manipulate the travel plan, and you can start to wind and weave a little bit and give yourself allowances to go one place or another, because you've set those parameters on either end that give you a good anchor to begin that planning process. So do this first. Okay, so think long term, number 1, find your rhythm, number 2, and then fill in the gaps, number 3. So a simple example that I can give you for right now even is us when we left from Kingwood and we were headed to Long Beach. So we knew that we wanted to get from Kingwood to Long Beach, and we had a certain amount of time to be there. But that gave us some freedom in the in-between that we could play with. So instead of just going straight down I-10 and heading west, we decided that we were going to go up and see my family in the Austin area. So we left Kingwood and we headed up to Austin. And then Amy found an amazing place that was a Harvest Host, that was a museum that we went to stay at on our route. That was a free place to park, and we just went in and paid a little money to go see the museum the next day, and saw all these amazing things in this museum. But we got to park on the back side of the museum. It was really cool, and so that was a lot of fun. And so that was one of the things that Amy found on our route. And so we may not have traveled as far that day, but we got to have a great experience. And then the next part of the trip, we went to Santa Fe, and then we went to Albuquerque, and then we came to, so we had all of these different things that we could do and experience. And we said, well, we want to stay a week here, 2 weeks here. And we just very slowly trudged our way across the country to get to Long Beach, and made it there in exactly the right time, despite of the fact that we had a big blowout And in spite of the fact that we had another issue with the leaf spring brackets breaking, it gave us a little bit of space to work our way across the country also. So, um, so when you are traveling, you're going from one part of the country to the other. Uh, Finding that end point, thinking long term, find your rhythm, fill in the gaps is going to give you a lot of freedom in your route. So, hey, listen, if this has been something that's been helpful for you, then I would so appreciate you. You can click like on my Facebook page at Explore the Unseen, or you can head over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Explore the Unseen, and you can just click the subscribe button there because I'll be going live in both of those places. So you can check those out. We've got a lot of other content on both of those places as well that are helpful tools and tips for people that are traveling, living in an RV, or just traveling in an RV for certain amounts of time. Um, and some of the adventures from our time on the road are there as well. So I really hope that you'll go to those places and click the subscribe, the like button, and follow along in our adventures. And thanks for being here today. I appreciate it. Again, I'm Jim Miller, and what I do is I help people figure out how to get into an RV and take all of the headache out of that planning process. And the way I do that is through that signature maps process that allows you to easily transition your life into your RV, whether it's for 14 days or for 14 months. So I look forward to seeing you again in 1 week, next Tuesday at 11 o'clock Pacific time, wherever it is that we're going to be. I don't know. No, we'll still be here next week, but in a couple weeks, it's going to start to shift around. So that'll be a lot of fun. So I hope that you guys have a great day, and